In Los Angeles Unified, we're the only teachers in the instructional technology division, or the information technology division. The rest are
I always
engineers.
say yes to speaking
You know.
requests unless Kim tells me not to.
Okay. But I would love to offer the opportunity because to me, that I think having my colleagues interact with your thoughts and ideas and listen to them, I think
Sure.
would be very valuable.
Right.
And those are the movers, and shakers, and they're all very different. They're nothing like me. I'm not going to say good or bad.
Yeah, I think, this, almost the bottom line on this stuff is, in many ways, the goodness of the tool or the environment is completely overshadowed by how good the documentation is in the teacher's own terms.
Mm-hmm.
This is something we've found out the hard way over and over again, that you have to go, this is why we're impressed with what some of the Japanese, because they have documentation in their blood.
Right.
And so I think that just realistically doing something, because this next project I've been talking about, we've been thinking about going about it in a completely different way from the standpoint of what it means to get people to understand it and to deploy it. And so it's because the content that we have right now, except for about 5 things I'd like to do, is pretty good. But I think that I think in order to make it something that most people who are already busy like mad and are getting underpaid would be willing to do any kind of learning on at all, I think it has to be laid out so that the logo had a vogue in the early 80s.
Yes.
And nobody realized that it was only the 5% of the teachers who were interested in new ideas who were interested in it. No special documentation was done for the other teachers who had a completely different set of motivations, and the whole logo thing failed. And so and the tendency for researchers, certainly has been for us, is there's a lot of work just making these tools, because you have to do them with less bugs than Microsoft ships with, because they're going to be pounded on by children.
I'm not going to say that's not hard.
And it is hard. And so when you take all of the work that researchers who are not production people are already putting in, and then realize that that is probably the smallest part of what actually has to be. So I think you need something that is more like the Squeakland Foundation that we have set up for eToys, but done ahead of time. I think there's something where there has to be something where a lot of documentation gets started earlier and is done by more people. And if you take a look at another system done, so Squeak is actually, as I said, is the parent language that eToys is built on top of. There's another one done by Mitch Resnick at MIT called Scratch, which uses many of the same ideas. And so the interesting trade-offs between, they have a much less education, they're much more of a media programming kind of orientation to the thing. But the thing that they've done so much better than we did is their web presence.
Sure.
And the way they share them, and they've hooked into the zeitgeist of the web in a very strong way. And it's not, so that they have at least gotten a lot more eyeballs because of the way they've done it, even though they don't have the same content. And we really took notice of that, because the question we've been asking ourselves, can you do something that actually has content and is still seen as something that is really accessible and easy and so forth?
There are people, I think, that are pulling off that level of out-of-the-box approach and that passion successfully. It really does depend on the leadership, the school culture. I mean, there's so many factors that come into play. The pressures from the outside. Right now is a difficult time in Los Angeles Unified because with all the cutbacks and the language that's going on, it's hard to be excited.
Yeah.
But I see, to me, in the way I work with the people I assist, it's, the more exciting tools and methods I can give them to work with, the better, the more voice I can give them to accomplish what they already the reason why they have that position. You don't last in teaching if there's not at least some core
Yeah.
reason. I mean, it's too hard. And that's why we lose a good 30 to 40% in the first 2-3 years.
Yeah.
But I think it's giving them, a means to accomplish that. This seems to be a very good tool, for that
Yeah,
group, I think.
I mean, another oversimplification, but science is a much easier area to maneuver in than math is. Math is owned by the NCTM. And whereas, so if you want to teach real math to kids, you're much better off trying to teach it in science class than to try and reform mathematics. There's so many politics involved with mathematics. Now, science is going to get politicized but it's not as politicized in any, there isn't a science SAT.
Sure.
There's English and math.
Right.
And so that whole chain of, and I spent some time fighting NCTM and various other math factions, here and there over the years, and I concluded that one was just, unless you had, unless President Obama, does a fiat about mathematics, that's probably not going to change that much. But he could do a fiat, and he has almost done a fiat at the National Academies. He gave a talk.
Sure.
That was a very powerful talk about science and science education and science funding. And his administration has put back some of the damage that the Bush administration did to NSF and NIH. And so something might happen along those routes. And because you need math to do science, you can do a lot on both. And of course, math and science co-evolved, particularly over the last few hundred years. So I think this isn't part of the interview, but I mean, it's just,
Sure.
that's part of the where you start driving the long wedge in there, I think.